Arun Bhakta Shrestha joins us live. He's the CEO of Hydrominds and a senior climate change specialist. Thanks for joining us this evening, Dr. Arun. You predicted in almost prescient, in prescient detail in 2021 ahead of COP 2026 or COP 26, what we have seen happen this past week. Given it's almost predictable, do you have any insights about this immediate rescue and recovery, what authorities on the ground should be looking out for?
Let me correct a little bit. Predicted might not be the right word. We knew that disaster of this kind of nature and scale could happen, but not exactly where, when, and at what scale, right? Now it has happened. Of course, the immediate thing is to concentrate on rescue and relief, which is happening. And immediately, the Prime Minister visited the location, and under Prime Minister's guidance, the security, all the security, wings are actively involved. But there are a lot of difficulties because of the flood. The access is very difficult. Highways are cut off at different places. Bridges have been washed out. Communication is not working. And in a lot of places, helicopters have to be flown in. And again, this is monsoon. And during monsoon, the weather is also not always good. So helicopters are also having difficulty to access those places. These are very remote, inaccessible places. Communication is bad. And, because this flood is not like pure water, it is debris mixed flood. So after the flood, there is very, loose kind of material on the surface. So working on that, using equipment, heavy machinery is also very difficult. And on top of that, what has been mentioned earlier, this existence of the barrier lake, the lake that flew out, but still has some water, and the concern that it might again cause secondary wave is there. So this also creates difficulty in rescue operations because the people have to be very careful so that they are not washed out. And actually, there are two lakes at the moment. One right where the barrier lake was, that is still there, and upstream of it also, just below where the glacier collapsed, there is also a smaller lake. And if that lake spills out, that could also create substantive damage to the downstream. Today, there was a warning advisory that the lake has started, flowing out. But luckily, the flow was not that big, so it did not create much damage. So that is the kind of situation the rescue and relief operations are facing currently.
All right, I will be careful with a prediction, but insofar as one can model, I suppose, look at the factors that could that go into deciding whether or not something is more or less likely to happen. So the hope is that rather than a sudden bursting of the banks, the natural draining of these rivers would put paid to that risk. Is there any way to reasonably estimate how much time that would take for the drainage to be sufficient to take that risk away?
That is exactly what we are trying to do. A lot of scientists are trying to do. We know lake exists from satellite imagery and also some, footages taken from a distance. We can see a significant area of water body is there. But how much water is stored there, we do not know. And also, what is very difficult to predict is what the nature of outflow, whether it will flow out slowly and gradually, or flow out immediately is something it is very difficult to predict. So we'll have to keep watch of it and see how much water is there, and then based on that, we can also kind of estimate the remaining risk that is still there.
Now, Dr. Arun, these are immediate concerns. They're no less important. But if I look back at, for example, your earlier lectures, you were warning even in 2021 that 1/3 of our glaciers will melt away even if we keep warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. And this is not even factoring in at high altitudes, you are seeing magnified effects from warming. If we exceed 1.5, and on this current track, we are exceeding 1.5, we're looking at losing 2/3 of our glaciers. If those glaciers melt and form lakes, which then burst their banks, that should not surprise, should it?
That seems like inevitable. Unfortunately, we are already at 1.42 degree world, right? We are living in 1.4 degree world and very rapidly approaching 1.5. And probably more than that. So we are going to lose a vast amount of glaciers. And, shrinkage of area of glacier is just an indication, right? That changes are happening dramatically. But what is important is, what does it mean? And there are many things that could happen because of this change. Of course, formation of glacier lakes and outburst of glacier lake is one, which can be very catastrophic also. But what we have just seen in Russia is another dimension of changing climate, warming, and changing cryosphere environment. So collapse of glacier, for example, what I think is because of this warming, the different thresholds of cryospheric ecosystem is changing. It is being more fluid and more unstable. So we're seeing things like what we have seen, collapse of glacier. A year ago, we saw thermocast being built and thermocast outflow happened. Right there in the upstream of Russia 14 months ago, from Purepu Glacier, small supraglacial ponds flushed out, including some englacial water body, created a huge flooding in the downstream. So there are, series of those events happening, which definitely indicates that the system has changed. It is no more like what it used to be decades ago. And in the future, if we continue like this, it is going to be even more in terms of frequency, in terms of magnitude. The typologies of those disasters, those hazards will change. It will happen in new places, in new form. That is inevitable if we are not able to control the root cause, which is control the atmospheric warming. And we know what is causing the atmospheric warming. And if we cannot control it, it is definitely going to happen.
Thanks for that. Dr. Arun there explaining why the Hindu Kush Himalaya is called the pulse of the planet. Dr. Arun Bhakta Shrestha, Hydrominds CEO and Senior Climate Change Specialist. Thank you for joining us this evening.